Let's start off by crediting South Florida. They played with the appropriate level of force and competitiveness.
How do you sign a $50 million deal, one of the biggest in sports history, only to be told you're not good enough for the team? This isn't just a story about a roster spot. It's a story about power, jealousy, and a decision that has insiders claiming the Team USA coach absolutely exploded behind closed doors. The Caitlin Clark saga is far more twisted than anyone realizes. And it all began with a contract that made her richer and more powerful than the very legends who would decide her fate. The ink was barely dry on Caitlin Clark's groundbreaking Gatorade deal when the whisper started. We're not talking about a standard endorsement. We're talking about a reported $50 million empire-building partnership. To put that in perspective, this deal dwarfs the initial contracts of countless male superstars. It was a statement. And Gatorade wasn't just signing a basketball player. They were anointing a queen. This single act catapulted Clark from college phenom to a global brand, a force of nature whose gravitational pull extended far beyond the court. She was suddenly in a financial stratosphere that most of her peers, including the veterans on Team USA, could only dream of. This wasn't just about money. It was about influence. It signified a seismic shift in the sports landscape where a rookie, before playing a dozen professional games, held more commercial power than the entire establishment. This unprecedented success, however, came with a hidden cost. While the world celebrated her triumph, a small, powerful group of gatekeepers watched with narrowed eyes. They saw her meteoric rise not as a victory for sport, but as a disruption to their carefully constructed world. The $50 million deal wasn't just a headline. It was a spark that would ignite a firestorm. And as the smoke began to clear, it became obvious that this celebration was about to be cut short by a brutal act of defiance from the very people who should have been welcoming her. But while the world saw a new icon being crowned, the inner sanctum of Team USA basketball saw something else entirely, a threat. For decades, the women's Olympic team has been a dynasty built on hierarchy and dues paying. It's a club where legends are forged over years of international competition, not through Nike and Gatorade commercials. The locker room is ruled by an old guard, veterans who have bled for their medals and expect a certain level of deference. They built the house, and they make the rules. Suddenly, Caitlin Clark, a rookie, was not just knocking on the door. She was threatening to become the face of the entire franchise without ever wearing the senior jersey. Whispers from team insiders suggest the mood was tense. The constant media coverage, the record-breaking jersey sales, the $50 million deal, it was all Clark all the time. For players who had dedicated their lives to winning gold medals in relative obscurity, this new reality was a bitter pill to swallow. It felt as if their lifetime achievements were being overshadowed by a player who hadn't earned her stripes in their world. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about a culture clash. The old guard valued grit, seniority, and a quiet team-first mentality. Clark represented the new age of athlete as brand, an individual whose star power could eclipse the team itself. The resentment wasn't always spoken aloud, but it was palpable. And this simmering fury was about to boil over into a public execution, a message sent to Clark and the world that no amount of money could buy you a seat at their table. What happened next wasn't just a roster decision. It was a coup. Then the bomb dropped. The official 12-player roster for the Paris Olympics was announced, and Caitlin Clark's name was nowhere on it. The reaction was not just disappointment. It was a collective shockwave of disbelief and outrage that reverberated through the entire sports world. It instantly became the biggest story, eclipsing the players who actually made the team. Fans were furious. Pundits were dumbfounded. How could the single most popular and influential player in the sport be left at home? The official explanations from the selection committee felt laughably thin. They cited her lack of experience with the senior national team. They mentioned the need for her to get some rest after a grueling college season. They talked about wanting players who had paid their dues. But to the public, these sounded like flimsy excuses designed to cover up the real reason. It felt personal. It felt punitive. Major media personalities like Stephen A. Smith went on air and called it one of the dumbest decisions in sports history. Not from a basketball perspective, but from a marketing and growth perspective. The decision was immediately framed as a massive blunder. an act of self-sabotage by a committee that seemed completely out of touch with the modern sports landscape. The snub wasn't just a footnote. It was a declaration of war. Team USA had willingly chosen to go to Paris without their brightest star, and in doing so, they had invited a level of scrutiny and criticism that would haunt them for months to come. The committee tried to control the narrative, but they had already lost. The world was demanding answers, and the official story just wasn't cutting it. At the center of this firestorm stood one person who had to publicly defend the indefensible, Coach Cheryl Reeve. In press conferences, she was a picture of composure, a stoic leader sticking to the company line. She spoke in carefully chosen words, emphasizing the importance of chemistry and the value of having veterans who understood the international game. She praised Clark's talent, but repeatedly fell back on the idea that the specific roster was a right mix to win gold. On the surface, it was a professional, albeit unconvincing explanation. But behind the scenes, a completely different story was emerging. Insiders and reporters with sources close to the team painted a picture of a coach under immense pressure. The explosion wasn't a public shouting match. It was the internal combustion of a coach caught between a rock and a hard place. On one side, she had the undeniable game-changing talent and marketing machine of Caitlin Clark. On the other, she had a locker room of powerful, influential veterans who, according to whispers, had made it clear they were not ready to welcome Clark into their fold. The decision was allegedly less about a strategic basketball choice and more about appeasing the established stars to maintain locker room harmony. Reeve's public defense was seen by many as a performance, a facade to protect the players who had reportedly pushed for Clark's exclusion. She was forced to champion a decision that many believed she knew was a mistake for the growth of the sport. Her calm demeanor was just a mask for the turmoil bubbling just beneath the surface, a desperate attempt to hold together a team whose internal politics had just spilled out into the public square. As the official excuses crumbled under public scrutiny, a darker, more human motive began to surface. Pure, unadulterated jealousy. This wasn't just about team chemistry for some. It was deeply personal. The conversation quickly turned to the team's veterans, particularly Diana Taurasi, long considered the GOAT of the WNBA. For years, Taurasi has been known for her fierce competitiveness and her less-than-welcoming attitude toward rookies. Before the season even started, she made headlines with a condescending comment warning Clark that reality is coming when she faced professional competition. It was framed as tough love, but in the context of the Olympic snub, it sounded more like a threat, the gatekeeper of the old guard drawing a line in the sand. Multiple reports suggested that Taurasi and other veterans were not thrilled with the idea of the entire Olympic experience being turned into the Caitlin Clark show. They had worked their entire careers for this moment, and they didn't want their final shot at gold to be overshadowed. The $50 million Gatorade deal was the ultimate symbol of this perceived injustice. A rookie was earning more from a single endorsement than many of them had made in their entire careers. This created a toxic environment where Clark's success was seen not as a rising tide lifting all boats, but as an affront to their legacy. The snub, in this light, looks less like a strategic omission and more like a final power play from an aging dynasty, a way to put the upstart in her place and remind the world who was still in charge, even if it was for the last time. The decision to leave Caitlin Clark off the Olympic roster wasn't just a failure of foresight. It was a catastrophic business blunder of epic proportions. We are talking about a potential billion-dollar fumble driven by what appears to be little more than ego and petty politics. The Caitlin Clark effect is a documented phenomenon. Everywhere she plays, ratings skyrocket, tickets sell out, and merchandise flies off the shelves. She single-handedly made the NCAA Women's Championship a bigger draw than the men's final. Her debut in the WNBA brought in record-breaking viewership for the league. She is, without exaggeration, a one-woman economic stimulus package for women's basketball. The Olympics are a massive global stage, and NBC, the event's broadcaster, was reportedly banking on Clark to be a central figure in their coverage. Her presence would have guaranteed millions of casual fans tuning in, people who might otherwise have no interest in women's basketball. By benching her, Team USA didn't just sideline a talented player. They told millions of potential new fans that their